My name is Daniela Perry. I serve as the Executive Director of the Georgia Chamber Foundation for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank a lot of our anchor investors for Max, who really helped to make all of our programming possible. If you're involved with any of these organizations or partner, please tell them thank you for their investments in our workforce ecosystem, and for all they do to help make sure we've got a strong talent pipeline. Again, I'm Daniela Perry. I'm really excited to be with you all this morning. I also serve on the Max Executive Committee, and was really excited that we get to introduce you to Joseph Santoro. The Georgia Transportation Alliance is an affiliate partner of the Georgia Chamber, and really leads the state's transportation um, advocacy work. And so I'm so excited to introduce y'all to Joseph to give a preview of what's really happening in the transportation system, and how this is going to impact workforce. So without further ado, Joseph, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk through some of the trends that y'all are seeing and what's going on in the state. So thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Daniela, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to share a few insights with you today. Again, my name is Joseph Santoro. I'm Executive Director for the Georgia Transportation Alliance. Let's see if I can get my screen here. Does that look all right on your end, Daniela?
Yep, looks great.
Perfect. Well, as Daniela mentioned, we are the Transportation Arm and Affiliate Group of the Chamber. So it's been a pleasure to work with Daniela and the Chamber team on their advocacy efforts, but working specifically on transportation policy development. But we also do a lot of data forecasting, looking out the next 25, 30 plus years, and what of our transportation needs and investments we need to make today, looking into the future. As we all know, growth is here, and it's going to continue to grow over that time span. So today, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are, some of those insights going into 2050, some of the assets that we have in our state that are continuing to expand in their capacity and grow, and then talk a little bit about some of our advocacy and policy development work, and kind of where the state's at in today's market. So just briefly, just wanted to give a brief overview of who we are as an organization. So we are a 501c4 organization, and so as such, we're set up very similar to, say, a Georgia Chamber or a nonprofit association where we have an executive committee and a board of directors. So you can see our six-person executive committee here with Georgia Power, the Georgia Highway Contractors Association, the American Council of Engineer Companies here in Georgia, their association, Norfolk Southern, Chris Clark with the Georgia Chamber. Then with Impact Public Affairs, Nick Giuliano, who represents Uber, Waymo, or Uber with their partnership with Waymo, but also several other transportation-related organizations that he represents. And so a great group of leaders on my executive committee. But just want to mention, too, that we also engage and have all of our state transportation agencies at the tables. We're having these policy development conversations, and that's, the Georgia Department of Transportation, working very closely with them, ACCG, our county's association, the Atlanta Regional Commission, obviously the Georgia Ports Authority, MARTA, the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and specifically their logistics department there, and then also the State and Road and Tollway Authority. So this gives, I won't go through all these companies, but it just kind of gives you a snapshot of majority of our board members. And so really it's makeup of the Georgia Highway Contractors. So several of the highway contractors such as E.R. Snell, as well as C.W. Matthews. And so we work very closely with them. We're also working with the Georgia Construction Aggregate Association. So that's Martin Marietta, Foley Materials, as well as Vulcan Materials. And so they provide a lot of the stone, sand, et cetera, that go into our roads. And then we also have several corporate members such as UPS, Delta, and as mentioned, Georgia Power. And then just lastly, just mention on this is, we have several of the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete Association members as well. So a great group of board members and leaders that help guide the work that we do at GTA. So before we dive into some of the key metrics, I just wanted to kind of give everybody just a quick overview of our mission, who we are, and really what we're working towards over the next year, but also the next several years. And so We like to pride ourselves on being on the state's only organization solely focused on identifying and promoting transportation solutions. And I think specific to this group that are connected to economic development and job creation. And so our vision and really what I'm working towards and what my group is working towards is more dedicated, sustainable revenue sources as we go and look into the future. As we all know, growth is upon us. So just giving you a few industry insights, kind of what does our transportation network look like here in the state? So you can kind of see here that we have roughly about 125,000 miles of roadway, 3,200 miles of Class 1 railroad, and so that'll be your Norfolk Southern and your CSX. But we also have about 1,000 miles of short line rail throughout the state, and we'll dive a little bit more into that here in a minute. We have two deep water ports with the Savannah port as well as the Brunswick port, as well as two inland ports with one in development that is going to be coming online in early 2026. So looking forward to having that come online. And then we have 5 intermodal rail yards throughout the state and 9 commercial airports. And we'll dive into some of those here in just a minute. But I think highlighting that the freight intensive industries kind of that you see on the right here make up approximately 40% of Georgia's total employment. So big part of our jobs here in the state. And kind of on the bottom left, you can see the kind of the breakdown of exactly what that looks like as it relates to construction and maintenance of our transportation infrastructure and those 110 plus jobs across the economy, but also those full-time jobs that are key industries that are directly tied to that work. And I think as Daniela and I kind of alluded to, and these numbers I think are a little conservative. I think they're maybe even higher. Excuse me. But as we look at 2050, these numbers may be a year old now, but Georgia's population is projected to increase by nearly 2.5 million individuals, and the workforce by 3.1 million. So that's about a 20% growth on the population side and about a 30 or so plus on the job side. So that's a lot of growth, a lot of folks that are going to be coming and moving to Georgia. And so we need to start planning and figuring out how we need to put those investments moving forward. So as I mentioned, as we look at 2050, I wanted to share just some insights as we look across our transportation network. So annual freight tonnage will increase by about 91%. I think that's going to be going up even higher as the Georgia ports, and we'll dive a little bit into that, or continue to expand and grow. So we expect to have more import exports in Savannah. And I think a big piece of this is, if we don't address these concerns and put these investments in place, congestion costs, are going to continue to grow and continue to cost Georgians. So you can kind of see that increase is going to be pretty substantial. And each day as it is now, and I think it is continue to rise, is that Georgia statewide congestion costs reaches over $15 million a day. So you can do the math, but that's a lot of cost to the state with our infrastructure. And so, but a lot of good things are happening, and we'll share that here soon. But on the manufacturing agricultural side, you can see the growth that we're expected to see on that end, as well as the distribution of freight throughout our state. So I won't read all this off, but you can kind of see the growth by tons and growth by value as we're talking about truck cargo across the state. And you can kind of see that it's majority in agricultural and manufacturing and distribution. Those are the two main buckets, and I'll have a slide that'll kind of give a graph of kind of what that growth looks like. But those are the two main industries that are going to continue to grow over the next 25 years here in the state. Highways projected to increase vehicle miles traveled by 27%, and freight by 37% over the next 25 years. So we're going to see a lot more congestion, which is shows that we're growing as a state, and those costs, as I mentioned, of congestion are going to continue to rise, and so we need to address those concerns. So this is a slide I always love to share, and really it's from our national partner, the American Transportation Research Institute, which every year they look at the top 100 freight bottlenecks in the U.S. And so Georgia has 3 of those on the top 10. and 9 in the overall top 100. And so this is a list we don't really want to be on, but I think it speaks to the growth that we're experiencing and the economic boom that we're experiencing. But you can kind of see the rundown of where those bottlenecks are. And I know Commissioner Russell McMurray at our Georgia Department of Transportation is continuing to work every day and putting investments in place to take these areas off the list. And I know he's done that. I think we had more on that top 100 list in previous years, and so it's good to see that some of those are getting off that list and moving down on that list. But this is going to continue to grow, right, as we talk about continued congestion and consumer demand. But we'll talk a little bit more about some of those investments. But with Georgia's road safety, I know this is one of the top priorities as GDOT as they're looking at their priority list of projects and where they put their dollars. Safety is one of those top priorities. And one of our other national partners, TRIP, does uh, a research study every year where they look at several different areas, whether that's bottlenecks, traffic crashes, the number of fatalities on our roads. So you can see that with the number of crashes, about 25, close to 25 billion in economic costs in 2023. And over the last, 5 or so years, we've seen quite a few fatalities on our roads. And I know a lot of these investments, whether that's, looking at those bottlenecks we talked about, looking at how we can upgrade some of our intersections, whether I know we've seen a lot of those in McDonough and other places where they're doing diamond interchanges to increase safety and efficiency, but also looking at getting and improving our truck network here in the state. So we talk a little bit about rail. It may be a little hard to see on the screen, but you can kind of see a breakdown of our Class 1 and Class 3 railroads throughout the state. As I mentioned, we have a little under 5,000 miles of track throughout the state, 28 freight railroads, with 26 of those being shoreline rails throughout the state. And these 28 freight railroads move about 190 million tons of freight in Georgia annually. And as we look at 2050, that's projected to grow by 71%. So we're going to continue to see more and more goods and services being delivered by rail. And I'm sure some of you have seen the news, and we'll have to see, how all that comes out. But I know Union Pacific, who controls a lot of the railroad infrastructure on the West Coast and in the Midwest, is having conversations with Norfolk on a potential merger. So we'll see how all that transpires. But that could potentially connect Georgia to the West Coast via rail, which will be an interesting conversation to have. Just a little bit more on the rail, and I won't read all this out, but as you look at strategies and solutions, we definitely need to increase capacity and the speed, looking at safety with whether that's intersections with local communities. I know with Savannah and the port growth, there's a lot of communities that have one, if not two or more rail crossings within their subdivision or right outside of their subdivision. And so there's a lot of work going on to remove those crossings and to not have as much of an impact on those little communities. I know that's something that our railroad companies are working across the state to address a lot of those concerns. But they will continue to look at capacity and increasing reliability and safety. So I did want to share this slide. This is from a report we completed November of 2024. But you can kind of see, as we talked about, the rail tonnage and that growth with warehouse and distribution and manufacturing being the two biggest areas of growth over the next 25 years. And I will bring your attention to the other slide. And I think this is, interesting comparison here as we look at the population growth we talked about. We looked at the job growth. The number of truckloads and the number of trucks that are going to be on our roads are going to surpass that population and job growth. So if we don't address a lot of the congestion and bottleneck concerns and start putting those dollars, it's going to be impactful for future opportunities for companies that are currently here. So just thought that'd be interesting to share with the group this morning. So kind of transitioning a little bit to our sea and inland ports. So economic growth projection, you can kind of see there. So 20-foot equivalent unit, or TEU, that's, you see those big 18-wheelers on the roads. They're about 2 TEUs. Sometimes you'll see some of the smaller ones, but so that's what a TEU is. And I would say in 2024, they moved 5.6 million outside of the port, and that's looking to grow to over 20 million. So that's going to continue to see more and more trucks and congestion as it relates to truck traffic and moving goods and services throughout our state. I would highlight that the Port of Savannah, and specifically the Garden City terminal, is the largest single terminal in North America, and just recently the third busiest port in the United States, and that's continuing to grow as we move into 2025. And they're going to continue to move forward with their investments. And I would just mention that the Georgia Ports Authority and our ports receive 0 state dollars. So they're all self-funded through other fees and ways that they manage their business with the containers and other ships and so forth that come through their port. But as we look at the next 5 years at the Georgia Port Authority, they're currently investing $4.6 billion over that time span to really expand a lot of their capacity, to bring in some of those bigger ships. And I had the opportunity to take a tour of both the Garden City terminal and the Ocean City terminal about a month ago now, and just seeing that supply chain and how large of an operation they have there is just crazy, and they're continuing to expand and bringing those larger ships. And I know GDOT right now is under a study as you look at the Talmadge Bridge, of potentially raising it by about 15, 20 feet, but also replacing the cables there. But I know there's some ongoing study of looking at an underground bridge. So there's a lot of discussion around that to bring in those larger ships to the ports of Savannah. So I mentioned briefly some of the inland ports. So there's one in Northwest Georgia, the Appalachian Regional Port, and this is serviced by CSX. So it's about a 42-acre dry terminal. So that helps service some of their freight, but also keeps trucks off the road. I'll say the Port of Brain Ridge is Southwest Georgia, and then the Blue Ridge Connector is going to be in Northeast Georgia. This is the one that's currently in development that should be completed by early 2026. About a 400-acre site that's going to be serviced by Norfolk Southern Rail. And just looking at a few of their metrics, it should take, once this port becomes online in its first year, it should take about 18 million trucks off the roadway. And by 2045, about 43 million trucks off the roadways. And as you look at jobs and that kind of growth in Hall County and that community, they're looking at about 9,600 plus jobs that are going to be supported by the port activity in their community. And so as we look at future growth and continue to get move freight throughout our state, I think we're going to see more inland ports come online across the state. So port strategies and solutions, we talked a little bit through some of the expansion capacity of being able to store more containers on site, being able to move more efficiently in and out of the port. And I will say too that GDOT has over the last few years done a study looking at the 4-county area in and around the Savannah and Brunswick port. And if we do nothing, if we do zero investment in our transportation infrastructure there, it's going to take a truck leaving the port 2+ hours to get out of that 4-county area. And so there's a lot of investment and dollars that are going in and around that 4-county area to mitigate the time it would take to get trucks and freight out in and out of our 4-county states or counties to get from the port. So a lot of growth and a lot of expansion projects that are moving forward. And I would just mention too, you may have seen in the news, but the Port of Brunswick is the fastest growing as it relates to roll-on, roll-off operations. And so they import and export a lot of auto cars as well as heavy machinery. So they're continuing to grow at exponential rate as well. So lastly, just transition to our air capacity and air cargo and sharing some of those numbers. I don't think I need to tell anybody on this call how Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport is renowned as the world's busiest over many, many years, as well as the most efficient. It's continuing to grow, but I think a lot of aren't focused much on the air cargo and the capacity that the Hartsfield-Jackson airport has. But you can kind of see what that growth looks like there on the cargo side. And you kind of see some of the facts as it relates to the economic impacts of the ports or of the airport and the number of jobs that service them as well. So, and I think we'll continue to see growth at our airports throughout the state. And as we look at air cargo specifically at Hartsfield, but also future growth in airports across the state. There's three main air cargo facilities, storage units in Hartsfield, about 6.4 million square feet, 147 acres, and they're looking to expand that 40 plus acres. So as I said, we'll continue to see that growth. And talking with Daniela just the other day, I think there's a lot of untapped potential as we talk about air cargo and utilizing that as way to get goods and services across the world. But and GDOT recently did a study looking at the demand as it relates to air cargo across our state with a little over 100 million in need. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those investments in all these categories. So as I said, where Hartsfield can alleviate bottlenecks specifically in and around the airport. And also look at continuing to maintain its position as the world's busiest and most efficient. So transitioning a little bit, wanted to talk through just briefly how our state funds our transportation infrastructure and what that workforce looks like. And so back in 2015, we passed a monumental bill, the Transportation Act of 2015 is what it's called. But essentially it raised our motor fuel tax in line with inflation. And so you can kind of see on the far left there that right now in 2024, we're paying about 32 cents per gallon motor fuel tax for the state. And that equates this past year to about $2 billion in dedicated sustainable revenue for GDOT. But as we look at more EV, more efficient vehicles, they're paying less and less into that motor fuel tax. So over the last decade, we've really seen a dip in the amount of motor fuel tax collected in a number of states, and Georgia sees a little bit of that. And so we've looked at, okay, well, how can we capture EV and other fuel efficient vehicles? So part of that package, they put together a EV registration fee or vehicle fee, if you will. So you can see the numbers there. It's about 200 for non-commercial. And so that helps build some of that up. But with our transportation fund, so with that EV vehicle, the heavyweight vehicle fee, and the hotel fee. So every night that folks stay at a hotel in Georgia, they're paying a $5 fee that directly goes to GDOT or the DOT. That's about 200 million or so that the state collects on an annual basis. And then the Transit Trust Fund through rideshare fees is about 23 million or so the state collects. So from a combined 4 billion this past fiscal year in 2024. And then you can see the federal investment that we receive as well. So just to kind of give you an idea, a visual, if you will, of if we didn't have that Transportation Act back in 2015 adopted, just the amount of revenue we would be able to deliver as it relates to maintaining our system, right? Repaving our roads, replacing or upgrading our bridges. So you can see just the amount of investment after the fact that is now going into our transportation network and making it more reliable, efficient, and safe. And so I would also mention, I think a lot of folks on this call know that the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, and just wanted to, we'll share a few other remarks on kind of where we're at in today's market, um, and what in the amount of projects that we're able to do with the same amount of money we've been receiving right since 2016. I did want to just quickly touch on freight and logistics. I know that's something that we talked a little bit about and it's going to continue to grow. But as we talk about legislation and policy development, there is a report now that's been released as part of House Bill 617 and passed in 2014 that essentially requires the Director of Planning at GDOT to put together an annual report that shows the freight projects and where those dollars are that the state's investing are going and what that progress looks like. So I just wanted to share with you, there's about 306 location-specific projects throughout the state. 280, a little over 280 of those are within economic development hubs. And so that's kind of classified as, warehousing or production within a 5-mile radius of 200,000 square feet. So you can see majority of the state, is covered with a few of those projects. But as we look at the need and able to actually fully fund these projects, some portion of these projects are somewhat funded, some are not. It's all in the report. Happy to share more information if anyone's really interested there. But you can kind of see where a lot of the congestion and a lot of the freight heavy industries are located here. So as we look, as I mentioned, the need over the next 25 years as it relates to freight and logistics, and to be able to fully fund these projects moving forward, we need about $84 billion. So that's about $3 billion or so a year, specifically for freight and logistics we would need. And I would just mention, and we'll give a quick breakdown, but over the last 2 years, we applaud Governor Kemp and the Georgia General Assembly for appropriating an additional $2.5 billion into our transportation infrastructure network. So we'll break that down a little bit. So back in 2024, they appropriated, and this was historic, $1.5 billion additional investment. So you can see kind of the buckets that those dollars went into, with 500 million of that going into freight. So that was a huge down payment that really helped keep Georgia on track as we're looking at growth in infrastructure projects that we need to move forward. And so with that 1.5 billion, you can see that the number of projects were expedited by a total of 40 plus project years, which I think is really significant, and also being able to move forward 19 new projects. And just kind of looking, as I mentioned, on the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. We're seeing that from a maintenance and what GDOT is able to do with the same amount of dollars roughly they've been getting since 2016. So you can kind of see from 2021 and 2024, the number of project lettings has almost halved. And the number of centerline miles that the state's able to resurface is in a downward trending cycle. And so as we look at the inflation and how that's impacting the cost, you can kind of see the increase there on asphalt, widening lanes in an urban setting, and then on the rural is even more costly, right, to get the workforce out there. So as I mentioned, 1.5 billion in 2024. Just this past year, the governor did a very similar, another historic payment of 1 billion additional transportation investment, with the same amount in freight logistics, about 500 million. And that 500 million is going to 3 different projects. As I mentioned, that 4-county area around the Savannah Port of widening I-16, widening Interstate 95, and widening SR 96 to Interstate 75 to I-16. So that's huge investment, but we'll continue to need that momentum moving forward. And as we look at 2026 budget, which started July 1st of this year, the state earlier this year appropriated $2.7 billion for DOT. And hopefully, as we get into the next session, we'll have more conversations about additional investment needs there. But as you look at the next 2 years, right, 26 and 27, there's about a 586 total projects throughout the state, with an estimate of almost $6 billion needed to complete those projects. So a lot of need out there. I know there's a lot of shovel-ready projects, and I know that's something that we're going to be working towards a lot with our members and partners. Last thing, what I wanted to mention as we talk about moving our workforce across, specifically Metro Atlanta, GDOT has 14 major mobility investment program and projects. And so you can kind of see the list here right now. I know they're moving forward. If anybody lives on the west side of Atlanta, or in Cobb, kind of West Cobb, you kind of see that I-285, I-20 West construction going on right now. So they're moving that interchange reconstruction forward. And as you look at the express lanes, I just wanted to kind of end on this, but as we look at kind of these big P3 public-private partnerships that would normally not be able to be funded by the state, are moving forward with groups that are coming together to fund these. And so State Route 400 Express Lane project, which is about a 16-mile stretch from kind of that North Springs MARTA station all the way up about a mile into Forsyth County. And so that'll be a two-way express lane project. And how that works is generally a P3, several groups come together to form a P3 to build it out, design it, and also manage it over the next 50 plus years. And so with that SR 400 project, the state received a concession of $4.6 billion for them to build that out. So it'll be probably sometime in August as they're projecting to financial close to get all the financials in place for that express lane project at SR 400. So that'll be interesting to see, as this will be the biggest kind of P3 partnership here in the state. And then just mention too on the I-85 West Express Lane project, it's about a 10-mile stretch South Atlanta Road to North Side Drive there. And that'll be a 2-lane express lane as well. And that right now is being considered. I think there's 4 P3 different groups that are being considered by GDOT for potentially moving forward with that project. And so we'll keep a close eye on that investment and that project moving forward. So I went through a lot of our state's assets. I went through some of the growth we're going to experience over the next 25 years. I went through a little bit about how the state funds our transportation, where we more or less need to be over the next 25 years. And every day, I'm thinking about ways of working with our partners at the state level, the governor, the lieutenant governor, our Georgia General Assembly, to figure out ways that we can continue to fund transportation moving into the future. So with that, I'm happy to take a quick pause here and potentially answer any questions, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Joseph. And I know you went through a lot of information, so give everyone a chance to think through some questions. Rob LeBeau, thank you for sharing that website that's there, talking about how ARC, GDOT, and TCSG are working together to talk about building a pipeline of workers to fuel kind of this industry growth in our infrastructure sector. And Joseph, I did want to start with kind of a question along those lines. I mean, I think you talked so much about the growth of our transportation network, whether it's freight and logistics, the more traditional things, but how are y'all thinking about how this could impact kind of our workforce needs in the transportation sector? And then also some of those related sectors like construction, manufacturing, I know agriculture, all of those industries are kind of driving this growth too. What are y'all seeing and kind of what are y'all planning for?
Absolutely. So we have several members, and I'll just mention a few programs that I know they're working towards and continue to grow every year. So I know the Georgia Highway Contractors Association has a kind of mentorship slash program where they get high school students, exposed to and actually be able to, utilize technology to simulate, working on heavy machinery, et cetera, to kind of expose them to those potential jobs down the line. And I would just say, just this past year, they had 700 um, high school students that were participating in that program. I got to meet about 30 of them when they took a tour of the Capitol, and I think a lot of them were planning to transition into that industry, right? So I think just that continual exposure, I think is really beneficial. And I would say also some of the other associations I know, ACEC, our engineering association, has several STEM related programs and initiatives where they're trying to engage our young professionals and K through 12 on the importance of engineering and a lot of those fields um, and opportunities there, right? Would mention too, as we look at the continued investment in our transportation infrastructure, I mean, we're going to continue to need more workforce in the construction industry, right, with our engineers, construction workers, but also on the laboring side as well. Um, so hopefully that answers a little bit of your question, Daniela. But I think as we continue to move forward into going into 2025, manufacturing, logistics, those are the industries, right? Warehousing, distribution. We're going to continue to see it grow, and we need to continue to look at ways to get our young professionals exposed to those job opportunities.
No, absolutely. I think that's great. And I would say too, when we've looked at kind of statewide, where are we seeing, really large industry growth, transportation and warehousing is kind of the fastest growing sector in our state. And I think it's absolutely what you talk through is, the state of Georgia's made some really smart investments in our freight and logistics network. And it's really, driven a lot of private investment here. We've got so many of those
Mhm.
natural assets, but Georgia's made some really smart investments with House Bill 170 that have kept it, very predictable and, strong growth. So it's been something that those companies have been able to capitalize on. And of course, too, is, we're seeing more e-commerce. It's driving a lot of that freight and logistics work because more people want more things delivered to their door. So I think it's an interesting thing, but we really are in a strong position to continue that growth, which is exciting. We did have one question about what kind of jobs are opening up for entry-level IT professionals. I have not pulled that lately, but I'm certainly happy to kind of pull it from our end and kind of see what it looks like statewide. But Joseph, I was curious if there are some industries that y'all are hearing that are really kind of again like building on this growth. I know manufacturing, agriculture, some of those sectors are really growing and being able to thrive off of this big investment in infrastructure. But are there other sectors that y'all are seeing that are really benefiting from the continued investments in our freight and logistics network?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you look at just statewide, a lot of these underserved communities or more rural areas, right? I think as we look at that list of freight and logistics specific projects and getting those fully funded and completed, I think that'll facilitate, obviously more development, more access to business and industries wanting to move there. And I think some conversations that we're kind of having is, I think you can look at it from two different perspectives, right? And I think two examples of this is Rivian and the Hyundai plant, right? And so with Rivian, the state and Rivian, we got all that infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure, all completed, and now it's ready to go for that mega site, right? Whether Rivian continues and we'll move forward with that, or if but it will be ready to go for anybody else that may come in, right? But with the Hyundai plant, that was kind of on the other side, right, where they built out very quickly, operations began very quickly, and the road infrastructure is now trying to catch up to that. So where we can continue to work to look at where there are other mega sites are throughout the state, whether economic development corridors and areas that we can go ahead and put that transportation infrastructure in So when, the Department of Economic Development, the governor and others go out and try to recruit and bring companies to the state, they have that, ready to go, and it's kind of shovel ready to move in, right? And start development there and kind of opening up those job opportunities throughout the state, right? And I would just say a lot of the logistics and manufacturing companies I'm talking with are continuing to expand in and around that Savannah port. And so we're going to continue to see more opportunities around the ports, as well as I mentioned, some of the inland ports that are going to be coming online in 2026. Um,
No, I think that's great. And I'm so glad you kind of brought back up, everything that's going on the coast, because you showed that map of really where those congestion points are. And obviously Atlanta was nice and red with all of our, kind of gaps and places and bottlenecks. But I think too, when you also looked at, you saw how much was around the coast. We're starting to see more of those bottlenecks and more congestion. And so I was wondering if you could kind of just talk a little bit about, I think folks are obviously on this call mostly in the Metro Atlanta area and thinking about how all of that congestion impacts them. But was wondering if you could kind of talk through, how y'all are envisioning bottlenecks kind of more towards the coastal area, obviously do kind of impact the statewide network. And I know, efficiency and having an effective network is really important. I was wondering if you could kind of talk through a little bit more about how having, efficiencies around the state really produce a more effective network overall.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, excuse me, as you look at that four county area, $500 million is going to three widening projects, right? And I think that'll help build out some of that capacity for freight moving to and from the Savannah port. Um, but if you go down near the Savannah port, there's a lot of infrastructure projects that GDOT's working on to improve those efficiencies in that part of the state. As we know, the number of containers at our port is going to double by 25. Looking at the number of truckloads throughout the state, it's going to go from roughly right now, there's probably about 24 million truck trips here in the state on an annual basis. That's going to increase to probably about 43 million, if not more, as we talk about consumer demand. Um, so as we look at these strategic investments, GDOT, as they review the project portfolio, where the needs and where the investment dollars need to go, they think about safety, right? They look at those bottlenecks and determine and project and do their own studies of, if we don't do anything, what is that going to look like? And needing to put those dollars to those infrastructure projects that are going to increase efficiency, safety, but also, be able to move Georgians where they need to go, right? Um, I think looking at Metro Atlanta specifically, I think some of these express lane projects and these major mobility projects of these intersection improvements, I think are going to help improve mobility. I know, where I used to work, I-285, 400, when they were, upgrading that intersection, it was rough there for a little while, right? But now I think folks traveling in and around that area, it's a lot more efficient, safer, getting on 400 ahead of time, and not having that bottleneck backup that would address a lot of safety concerns. So hopefully that answers your question. But I think as we look out to the future, we're going to continue to need more investment in our transportation infrastructure. I know, working and talking a lot with the Atlanta City Council, and I'm a resident of the city of Atlanta, and just as the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, there's a lot of need out there for resurfacing, a lot of need for replacement and new roads, right, for new communities. Um, so I think where we can work to continue to look at ways of funding this, and being able to bring more dollars to transportation is going to be critical moving forward.
No, absolutely. And I think, Georgia's been a great place for investment because we've had an efficient, effective network. Companies can move freight through really quickly, and we need to continue that if we want to continue to see the investment and having, lots of, ships and companies choose the Georgia ports at Savannah and
Mhm.
Brunswick. Um, We do have one question about passenger rail, Joseph, and I'm not sure if you've heard anything on passenger rail lately. I know that the freight network is really, getting all of those trucks off the roads via our, rail system with CSX and Norfolk Southern and those short line railroads that are across the state. But I was curious what conversations you may be hearing about passenger rail in the state.
Yes, and I know this is something that's been an ongoing conversation, and I think more recently GDOT has been working on getting some community input and looking at what that could look like for the state. Whether that's a passenger rail, to and from Metro Atlanta to Savannah and maybe beyond, right? I know there's a lot of discussion around that. I think it just really comes down to how do we fund this, right? I think as you look at the state, there's about four regional, but also several single county that have transportation splosts or a TIA, a regional transportation splost that essentially allows them to collect a sales tax to help fund some of these transportation projects. But just the demand, the cost is far exceeding kind of what they're able to bring in, right? So the demand's always going to continue to grow. So I think there's a lot of conversations going on around potential passenger rail. I just think we need to have more conversations about, okay, how do we fund this, and what is that program? What does that look like? Um, but I know there's been a lot of discussion in and around that for many years now. So as we hear more about that, happy to share and talk more about that as that move may continue to develop and move forward. I will say, as we look at going back to some of those major mobility projects, I think we'll see um, they're working towards, and it'll be a similar P3 kind of structured program, but essentially a truck only commercial lane going from Macon to Metro Atlanta, right? And so as of now, I'm hearing it'll be roughly just a northbound lane and not both ways, but that should help bring truck traffic off our interstates and help with safety and congestion in those areas, as we know freight and trucks are going to continue to grow in our state. So I'll
Yeah,
stop there.
more trucks is kind of going to be the name of the game as we continue to grow. We do have a question too about the rail system in the Summerhill community of Atlanta. I was curious if you had some insights on the rail network there, whether it's freight or kind of those pieces.
And you mentioned, was that Summerhill in
Yeah.
Atlanta?
Yep.
Yeah. So, as we look at Summerhill, they're working on the first bus rapid transit or BRT in our state. And so that's a dedicated lane purely for the bus network, right? I know MARTA was hopeful to have that online prior to the 2026 World Cup, but I think after digging up a lot of the city and finding buried parking decks and just a wide range of things that could be considered historic, which then paused development. And so there are a lot of those type of issues that they ran into, kind of delaying that project, but it will be coming online. Can't give you an exact date, but I would say sometime late 26, possibly probably 27. But that'll be the first BRT in our state. And so it'll be a dedicated lane. It won't be barricaded. So, traffic can go in and out of that. So there'll be some, I think, enforcement related things that they need to be thinking about, right? But that'll be interesting to see how that gets rolled out. And I would mention too, as relates to the Express Lane project and specifically the State Route 400, they, as part of that 4.6 billion, they're putting about 110 million to MARTA to help build out some of the stations up there. And then the buses will also be able to use the Express Lane as kind of a BRT, right? Being able to utilize that lane to move those passengers quicker through heavy traffic times, right? So as we look at what local communities are doing, right? I know Common Gwinnett have been having a lot of these conversations, and they had a ballot measure in both communities that failed in 2024, but they're still moving forward with some of their programs, looking at bus rapid transits in their communities, but also I think doing a lot of pilot and other programs around microtransit. So we talk about our ride sharing services, right? This would be a county public run program where you're able to get on your phone, get on the app. If you live within one of those districts or you live in the county, right, you can pick up your phone, pay $2, and get somebody to come, bus to come pick you up and take you where you need to go within your community for a very low fare, right? And so I think we're seeing a lot of communities that are looking at ways to move, whether they're seniors in their community that don't have a vehicle or can't drive, right? This would be an alternative way for them to kind of get in and around their community. And so I think we'll see more of those conversations moving forward.
And Joseph, if people want to learn more about that BRT project, is MARTA the best place MARTA's website to kind of learn more about kind of the extent of all that network?
I'd say MARTA. I have a few presentations that I can share with you, Daniela, and you can kind of share some of that information out. But yes, I would say MARTA would be your kind of go-to on that. But I'm happy to share some resources of what that kind of scope of that project looks like, what communities, what stops, what does that look like?
Great. Well, Joseph, want to thank you again for all your time this morning. I know we are close and we'll make sure to share out Joseph's presentation. You can see his contact information here as well. So certainly lots of good network. I'm so glad y'all are, getting to see all the great work that's going on in the state. And Joseph, again, appreciate your expertise with us this morning to talk through all of the exciting things in the transportation network.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. I think we, as a state, and I was just at a national conference with several other GTAs, if you will, and advocacy groups for transportation investment across the state, and just learning about the challenges that they have in their communities, the political, the funding challenges, right? And then just looking at other states' transportation assets and just seeing that and talking through some other states, Georgia was well positioned with the assets we have in our state. We have, I would say, the top class commissioner and Department of Transportation with, I think Russell McMurray is going to be chair of AASHTO, which is kind of the national state DOT organization, right? So he's going to be leading and working through a lot of the federal funding in those conversations. And just to mention that, as we look at Georgia moving forward, what I'm working on, and I'll kind of leave y'all with this, and once we move forward and complete this report, I'm happy to share it with this group. But we're looking at, okay, what are the economic benefits of investing in transportation? What does that output look like for job and job growth through different parts of the state? So if we invest $1 today, what does that mean in the future, right? And so we're putting together all that information, working closely with H&TB, and bringing a few other partners online to help us kind of put that together. So that's something that we're kind of working for as we look at education and educating our elected officials and others on the importance of why we need to invest today, as we look at future growth and job growth. So I'll stop there, Daniela, but all that to say is we're working towards more funding, more dedicated, sustainable funding here in our state. And I would just say over the last decade, Georgia really has been a leader in innovation and as it relates to investing in our transportation and getting to where we need to be in maintaining our transportation network. So thank you all again for the opportunity to join you this morning. And you have my contact information, but I'm here as a resource. So please let me know how I can be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. And really, Joseph's a wealth of information. Was with the Council for Quality Growth for a number of years before he joined the Georgia Transportation Alliance at the end of last year, which is crazy that we're already that far along. But again, Joseph, thank you so much. And I hope everyone's really enjoyed the overview of everything going on in transportation. I think we take for granted those roads that we drive on every day and them being safe and reliable. So make sure that we are grateful for the strong investments. If you're not a member of Max, we'd love for you to consider to join. These are some of the benefits, but if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to Joy Wilkins. Her email is down below, and she can talk you through all of the benefits and all of your options. And here is a quick QR code to go ahead and just move forward with that. We've got some upcoming events here, so please join us if you are able. Max Talks, talking through Amazon's workforce needs and their new Stew Mountain facility. We've got a conversation for Max Minutes with Jenny Taylor. She is our current chair of Max and is the Chief Mission Officer with Goodwill of North Georgia. So if you want to know anything about workforce, she knows it all. So make sure to join us. And then Max Academy, working with second chance employers. I know we are hearing that from our member companies, a greater interest in working with that part of the workforce and making sure they've got great opportunities to have upward mobility in their careers. So again, thank you to our anchor investors. Thank you to all of you all for joining us, but have a great Friday and a great weekend.